When the people you trust most shatter your world, you learn that betrayal often hides closest to home. My husband John and I exchanged vows 2 decades past within our modest local church. Our initial marital years overflowed with affection, deep connection, and aspirations for a life together. We savored intimate evenings and found ourselves inseparable throughout the daylight hours. We frequently walked arm in arm along our town's charming avenues, stealing quick kisses at every turn. A couple of years later, our daughter Emily arrived, and our priorities shifted entirely to her upbringing. Over time, the initial spark in our relationship dimmed, settling into a familiar domestic rhythm. John embarked on a career as a long-distance truck operator, undertaking week-long journeys across the nation, always eager to return to my warmth and attention. These homecomings felt like fresh starts, a pattern that suited us both. I, meanwhile, established my own quaint beauty parlor, steadily building a clientele among the style-conscious residents. As Emily matured and pursued a demanding interior design degree at an out-of-state university, John and I felt immense pride in her tenacity and effort. However, during John's most recent visit home, I started to feel a growing sense of annoyance and strain in his presence. Almost everything about him irritated me, from his morning ritual of coffee to his nighttime snoring. I found myself anticipating the end of his break, longing for some personal space. 2 days later, John departed on another extensive trip across several states. I bid him farewell without much sorrow, instead eagerly looking forward to 3 weeks of quiet solitude in our comfortable home on the town's edge. The thought of living entirely for myself brought me increasing delight. During the first week, I indulged in self-care, sleeping late, reading by lamplight, and enjoying meals alone at my favorite eateries. I cherished the freedom from daily obligations and the ability to simply please myself. Yet, by the midpoint of John's journey, a feeling of boredom settled in, accompanied by a surprising yearning for his return. One pleasant April afternoon, I decided to walk around the town square near our house. An unexpected cool breeze, however, sent me seeking refuge in a charming corner cafe for a warm cappuccino. The server, a tall, attractive young man, turned out to be Aaron, the son of an old acquaintance. We chatted, recalling mutual friends and shared memories. Later, after placing my order, I couldn't help but admire Aaron's professional manner and appealing personality. I was captivated by his self-assuredness, broad shoulders, and captivating grin. His attentive and appreciative gaze made me feel exceptionally beautiful and desired, despite no longer being a young woman. That night, for the first time in years, Aaron occupied my thoughts, leading to an alluring, sensual dream involving him. The next day, I struggled to concentrate at my salon, plagued by persistent thoughts and fantasies about young Aaron. I frequently checked his social media profiles and pictures. One day, John noticed me viewing Aaron's Instagram and grew suspicious. We had an argument, with John convinced I was concealing something from him. Even on his final trip, John left without a proper goodbye. A few days after his departure, Aaron messaged me on Facebook, admitting his thoughts about me and his wish to meet again. I considered it destiny and enthusiastically suggested we dine at a charming Italian restaurant by the water. After our meal and a few glasses of wine, we shared a kiss in the back of a taxi, leading to an unforgettable night. Knowing John would be away for another 3 weeks, I felt no hesitation in inviting Aaron to stay with me during that time. On weekends, we enjoyed picnics in a scenic valley outside the city, walked arm in arm through secluded parts of the city park, and watched romantic films at the cinema, sharing kisses in the back row. I was thrilled by the prospect of a passionate affair with a younger lover, while my husband was away on his long journeys. However, what truly excited me were the intense nights spent with the vibrant 20-year-old in our marital bed. It felt like a revival of my carefree, youthful dating period. The deception was exposed in the most startling way imaginable. John, by chance, came home from his trip a couple of days ahead of schedule. Remembering our bitter argument before he left in the 2 weeks of silence, he decided to surprise me. Arriving home, John carried a large bouquet of red roses and a bottle of champagne, anticipating a romantic evening after our time apart. He had no idea how terribly this day would unfold. As he approached the house, he noticed the dim lights in the bedroom and living room, which pleased him, indicating I was already home. With anticipation, he quietly entered, using his key. Soft instrumental music filled the living room. Leaving the flowers and champagne in the kitchen, he cautiously climbed the stairs to the bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, and a horrific scene met his eyes. I, his beloved wife, whom he had missed for 2 weeks, was unclothed, kneeling before a young man who held my hair, my hands restrained behind my back. The young man was the first to spot John in the doorway, recoiling in terror. I turned around, bewildered. I barely had time to register John's clenched fist before he lunged at my lover in a blind fury, savagely attacking him with my restraints. I could do nothing but scream and cry helplessly, pleading with my husband to cease the violence. Finally, John, breathing heavily, pulled away from the battered young man. His hands were still clenched as he stared into my eyes, radiating a mixture of revulsion and a desire to tear me apart. I pressed against the wall, attempting to explain, but John refused to listen. He moved closer and punched the wall beside me with immense force. In that moment, terror consumed me, and I mentally prepared for severe consequences. However, John managed to control himself, choosing not to escalate the situation further. "Get out of here, now!" he roared, pushing the naked lovers out the door. Despite our protests, his rage was so intense that he cared nothing for what would become of us in our disheveled state. He neither knew nor wished to know our fate afterward. The next day, John initiated divorce proceedings at the registry office, and that evening, he drank at a bar until he passed out. When he awoke the following morning with a terrible hangover, he realized his life was utterly shattered, and he faced starting anew at 45 years old. It was incredibly difficult and agonizing. He saw me a few times during the divorce and asset division. I begged for his forgiveness, wept, and pleaded with him to preserve our family for the sake of our shared history and our daughter. However, John remained firm. Later, he learned that I did move in with the young lover, despite his mother's objections and the disapproval of friends and acquaintances. Although he told our daughter he wished us happiness, deep down, he still harbored resentment toward us both. He understood our relationship was doomed to fail due to our age and life experience disparities. In time, the young man would likely seek a younger partner, leaving me isolated. John resolved to move forward and not dwell on the past. He relocated to a different city, found an engaging new job, and met a woman his own age who truly understood him. While the emotional wounds persisted, life continued. Yet, the ripples of betrayal extended far beyond that initial heartbreak. What I'm about to share reveals another layer of deceit, proving that sometimes the ones closest to you can inflict the deepest wounds. I must admit, I never truly believed in instant affection until I met Emily. We were colleagues at a fast food establishment, and I was immediately captivated by her piercing blue eyes, luminous smile, and long blonde hair. Before Emily entered my world, I was content with casual dating. For a period, I had different girls visiting my apartment almost nightly, and initially, I thought that was precisely what I desired. However, Emily taught me a profound lesson without any physical contact from the outset. I understood that winning her affection would not be simple. Emily resisted my advances because she perceived me as being like other men she had encountered. I assumed she found me somewhat disagreeable, despite our brief conversations seldom lasting more than 5 minutes. I was determined to prove I was different. While I did share some traits with those other guys, I genuinely wanted to change. So, I spent several weeks striving to convince her of my unique character, which meant dismantling the false image I had previously projected. Before this narrative progresses, it's important to mention that I hadn't completed college at that point. I went through a challenging phase in my life when I decided to withdraw from school, feeling as though the world was against me. This experience resonates with many who have faced similar struggles. I believe the educational system was unfair, particularly because I grappled with social anxiety. Regrettably, by the time I sought help from a therapist, I had already made the decision to leave my studies. Consequently, I started working at a fast food restaurant, feeling as though my parents had lost faith in me. Despite my choice to leave school, my parents supported me by covering therapy expenses while I resided in their basement. However, I couldn't escape the looming presence of my elder brother, John, who was their golden child. He held a corporate position, possessed an economics degree, and was even preparing to marry his high school sweetheart. Throughout most of my life, I strived to equal his accomplishments. Despite my academic setbacks, I relentlessly sought ways to earn my parents' approval and validate my worth. I became obsessed with the idea of surpassing him in their estimation. It felt like an impossible feat, and I viewed myself as a failure compared to John's achievements. This was the most agonizing aspect, and each day spent in the basement brought the heavy weight of my family's disapproval. It was disheartening to feel like an outsider in a place where unconditional acceptance should have been the norm. Life began to lose its appeal, and merely existing became a struggle. To overcome Emily's reservations, I realized I first needed to overcome my own. I began with small gestures of kindness, like holding doors open for her and assisting with customers we both found challenging. I made an effort to truly listen to her, setting aside my own trivial thoughts and maintaining a respectful, attentive demeanor. Gradually, I noticed her defenses lowering, and she began to confide in me. When I entered a relationship with Emily, it felt as though I stepped into an entirely new dimension where I could finally breathe freely. I hadn't even realized how constrained I had been until she lowered her emotional barriers, revealing the remarkable person she truly was. Every outing with her transformed into an exciting adventure, meticulously planned by her imaginative spirit. We ventured beyond the commonplace, discovering hidden treasures in captivating locations. We even took impromptu trips to nearby cities in Emily's dependable Toyota. One of our favorite pastimes was visiting amusement parks. Despite my crippling fear of heights, Emily encouraged me to brave roller coasters, and her presence instilled in me an unshakable sense of courage. With her, I felt unstoppable, as she constantly reminded me that life was meant to be embraced, regardless of challenges. She saw potential in me, even when I couldn't see it myself. When I finally gathered the courage to share my life story with her, I anticipated laughter or rejection, but her reaction was entirely unexpected. Even though it was a lighthearted comment, my living situation in my parents' basement and my lack of a high school diploma could have led Emily to doubt me as an ideal partner. Yet that wasn't the case. She empathized with my struggles because she had faced similar pressures from her own parents. They were demanding and overbearing, constantly pushing her to meet their expectations. Instead of succumbing to that pressure, Emily bravely chose to forge her own path and live life on her terms, even in modest circumstances in a small apartment near a diner. She made the most of her space, transforming it into a cozy sanctuary that felt like ours. Thanks to her influence, I learned to appreciate the seemingly minor moments that often go unnoticed. This was just one of the many qualities I admired in her. In her presence, I found a safe haven where I could truly be myself, free from the burden of my parents' expectations and the judgment of others. So, her betrayal was particularly difficult to accept. Against my better judgment, I introduced Emily to my parents. The reason for this decision remained unclear to me, as I had long ceased to care about their opinions. Yet, a part of me still craved their recognition. Emily was the sole source of normalcy and goodness in my life, and I wanted my parents to witness that. It happened on that significant evening when she met everyone, including John. At the time, I perceived no signs of unease. I naively believed their interaction was purely cordial and polite. After all, his fiancée was present, and I couldn't conceive of any ulterior motives behind their newfound friendliness. However, from that evening onward, I began to observe shifts in Emily's conduct. She became distant, and it appeared she wasn't investing as much effort into our relationship. Initially, I hesitated to acknowledge this, fearing I might seem overly possessive or paranoid. I convinced myself that these worries were merely figments of my overactive imagination, or that something was troubling Emily. She had always been my rock, my confidant, whom I playfully called my little therapist, the one I turned to for support. Unfortunately, I was too preoccupied to connect the pieces. In an attempt to prevent our relationship from disintegrating, I tried to stay close to her and offer unwavering support, but my efforts seemed to make no difference. Instead of valuing my presence, Emily began to view me as overly intrusive and invasive, as if I were delving too deeply into her personal life. Overnight, Emily stopped engaging in our usual activities, such as going to the movies or visiting amusement parks. Our conversations dwindled, and I found myself in a state of panic. It felt as though I was on the brink of losing the only source of happiness in my life, and that thought was unbearable. Desperate to salvage our relationship, I made an impulsive decision to take on a second job at a local shoe store. I know it might sound trivial, but I genuinely believed that by being able to purchase more things for her, I could bring joy back into our relationship. I clung to the hope that my gifts would reignite the fading spark between us. She accepted them with visible pleasure, but regrettably, they did not improve our connection in any way. No matter how diligently I tried, nothing seemed to have a positive effect. In fact, the more I attempted to win her back with presents, gestures, and sacrifices, the quicker her affection for me seemed to diminish. In an effort to salvage what remained, I decided to surprise Emily by giving her some room, allowing her to breathe without feeling stifled by my presence. I assumed she would want to see me after this break. There was some improvement in our discussions, which led me to believe that we were gradually mending our relationship, or so I convinced myself, eager to see a glimmer of hope in Emily's eyes. I saved money for several weeks to buy her the desired bracelet she wanted, hoping it would be a tangible emblem of my love and devotion. The gift came with a beautiful bouquet of her favorite flowers. I desperately wanted her to comprehend the depth of my affection and my unwavering commitment to our relationship. Looking back on it now, I can't help but feel embarrassed by how pathetic and desperate I appeared. As I approached her house, each step was filled with anticipation, and the mere thought of seeing her again brought pure joy. It was agonizing to be apart from her, but today I would finally reunite with her. With a spare key in hand, I carefully entered her house, noticing the faint glow of her lamps from beneath the door. However, as soon as I stepped inside, an unexpected sound reached my ears. It was an unusual noise, completely perplexing. The source of these mysterious sounds emanated from her living room, distinct from the sounds of the television. They echoed through the room with a clarity and realism that were almost palpable. They bounced off the walls, creating an unsettling atmosphere. Immediately, an anxious feeling seized me, and my heart pounded while a knot formed in my stomach. A wave of uncertainty washed over me, making me ponder whether to continue or retreat. But curiosity overwhelmed caution and propelled me to move cautiously toward the source of the noise, trying not to startle her. With each step, the intensity of the sounds increased, sending a sickening feeling through me. When I carefully peeked around the corner, my world shattered into countless fragments. There on the very sofa where we had spent innumerable nights together, I witnessed a sight that tore my heart apart. Emily, the love of my life, was locked in an embrace with none other than my own brother. I froze in place, as if time had stopped, struggling to comprehend the treachery unfolding before my eyes. My mind raced frantically, searching for some explanation for this nightmare. However, no reasoning could account for the profound pain and betrayal I felt at that instant. It seemed that Emily's deceit not only destroyed our relationship, but also shattered my very essence. In a shocking act of perfidy, my own brother, John, not only betrayed me, but also secretly began a relationship with my girlfriend, Emily. The agony I felt at that moment is beyond words, as if the very foundation of my existence crumbled instantly. Emily, whom I once considered the adoration and inspiration of my life, had now become the source of my emotional devastation. As the room spun around me, the initial shock gradually gave way to an overwhelming surge of anger coursing through my veins. Feeling the weight of my emotions, I knew I had to escape this toxic situation before doing something I would regret. I quietly departed this painful scene, and an unbearable ache pierced my heart. How could both John and Emily betray me like this? While I always had a strained relationship with John, the fact that he had an affair with my girlfriend was a cruel blow. It felt like he was destined to succeed in every aspect of life, while I was always relegated to the sidelines. And Emily, despite everything that once bound us, my affection for her had now transformed into an intense, consuming hatred that I couldn't control. When my relationship with John was completely obliterated, I was consumed by rage. In the days that followed, I gave Emily what she seemed to desire most: distance. Fueled by fury, I took a few days off under the guise of illness and retreated to the basement. In my isolation, impulsive thoughts began to flood my mind, threatening to override my common sense. The desire to call John's wife and reveal the truth burned within me, but deep down, I knew that wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't satisfy the insatiable craving for retribution that had taken hold of me. Then, a sudden realization struck me like a lightning bolt. It became clear that I needed to ensure they faced the consequences for their actions directly. With this newfound determination, I arranged another family dinner, disguising it as an important announcement about significant changes in my life. The evening seemed normal, with our parents present, but then my seemingly perfect brother and his unsuspecting fiancée joined us. His appearance, as if everything were normal, and his attempts to initiate conversation with me fueled my endless anger. His calm demeanor, as if his affair with my girlfriend meant nothing, infuriated me. I bided my time, waiting for everyone to sit down and enjoy the meal before making my move. However, Just as I was about to speak, Emily interjected in the conversation. I couldn't help but notice her subtle cues, the change in her tone, the way she chuckled at his jokes, and the wide smile she directed exclusively at him. It was unbearable. Desperate for attention, I seized the moment, pretending I was finally ready to share my long-anticipated news. The audience fell into an expectant silence, eagerly awaiting my words. As all eyes turned to me, I stood up with a glass of wine in my hand, my actions carefully calculated. I turned to my brother, adopting a facade of admiration, and began showering him with praise, highlighting his accomplishments and expressing deep pride in his relentless pursuit of his desires. He absorbed every word, relishing the attention. Deep down, it hurt to witness his smug grin, as if his superiority remained intact despite my deliberate efforts to elevate him with compliments. Glancing at Emily, I noticed a distinct spark in her eyes when she looked at my brother. It was a mesmerizing gaze, as if he embodied everything she had ever wanted and more. I clutched the glass, threatening to shatter it under the pressure of my anger, but I couldn't release it. A surge of rage coursed through my veins, urging me to conclude my speech quickly. With a forced smile, I raised my glass, congratulating my brother on his illicit affair with my girlfriend. A tense silence filled the room, and all eyes turned to the guilty couple. I felt an adrenaline rush, my heart pounded, my hands grew clammy, but I maintained my composure and took a sip of raspberry wine. Except for Emily and John, everyone in the room wore expressions of surprise and disbelief. They looked like startled deer caught in headlights. Despite my mother's insistence for me to sit down, I remained firm, determined to share every detail of the events I'd witnessed. I felt that if I had seen it, they deserved to hear about it. And so, I began my account. I spoke at length about where I discovered them and the compromising position they were in. Despite my parents' pleas for me to sit down, my gaze never left Emily's teary eyes. I couldn't help but think, how dare she shed tears now, after the terrible acts she had committed? She had the audacity to sit and pretend to be innocent. John tried to intervene, grabbing my arm and attempting to lead me to a chair, but I quickly pushed him away. I couldn't hold back my words. I needed to express everything that was boiling inside me. As a result, the emotions on the faces of those present ranged from bewilderment to anger. Emily and John exchanged guilty glances, unable to meet anyone's eyes. I remember letting out a bitter, ironic laugh, meant solely for their benefit, and then I sank back into my seat, allowing the scene to unfold before me like a cinematic spectacle. I had shattered their flawless facade. My parents, who had always viewed my brother as the epitome of perfection, looked at him with a mix of confusion and disappointment. I savored the moment, relishing the truth revealed to them. They couldn't summon the courage to deny it. For a brief moment, I forgot about John's fiancée, but she quickly grabbed her glass and hurled it at my brother, causing me to burst into laughter as the wine cascaded down his face. Enraged, she stormed out of the room, tossing her engagement ring at him. My parents, who had always valued honesty and could never have imagined that their beloved son would prove to be such a despicable person, were left speechless. They chastised him for his complete lack of respect. There was shame and disappointment in their voices, sending a shiver down my spine. Emily, too, couldn't escape their attention. Their gazes turned to her, and they sternly ordered her to leave their house immediately. I didn't look in her direction. I had reached my limit in communicating with her. Even when she attempted to apologize to all of us for the horror they had caused, her words entered one ear and quickly exited the other, having no effect. Truth be told, a part of my heart left with her as she walked out the door. When all was said and done, at that moment, I felt like I had hit rock bottom. The consequences were unavoidable. While my parents acknowledged my pain, they disapproved of how I handled the situation. They believed that my brother's fiancée deserved to learn the truth in a more respectful manner, and for the most part, I agreed with them. I must admit, I was somewhat self-absorbed in that moment, but given the immense pain and profound loss I felt, it was nearly impossible for me to consider anyone else's perspective. As we retired to our bedrooms that evening, a heavy cloud of tension hung over the house. John's worst fears had materialized. My parents regarded him with a mix of disdain and indifference, and eventually, despite the passage of time, they made the difficult decision to eject him from our home. It became evident that this situation held much more significance for our parents than we initially assumed. I suspect it was fueled by deep affection for his ex-fiancée. He humbled himself to the point of pleading for a change of heart, but they remained resolute in their decision. I couldn't help but feel for him, seeing how even his ex-fiancée rejected him and denied him the chance to explain himself. He was left to deal with this on his own. Speaking of his ex-fiancée, she shamelessly exposed him on social media, and many members of our community joined in the public condemnation. John at one point became a symbol of disgrace, the embodiment of dishonor in our town. As for Emily, from what I've gathered, her life spiraled into chaos. She left the fast food establishment, but maintained contact with one of her friends, who happened to be a coworker of ours. This friend confided in me, revealing that Emily was facing eviction due to substantial overdue rent, and the landlord had taken her to court. Living in a noisy trailer park, I made a firm decision to pursue the same happiness that Emily once brought into my life. But this time, I was determined to find it within myself. It may sound sentimental, but I embarked on a profound journey of self-discovery, during which I realized that I deserved more than what others could offer. That's how I reclaimed my destiny. By a stroke of luck, I secured a job that not only paid better, but also offered me a chance to break free from my current life situation. When I truly experienced independence for the first time, everything else faded into the background. Here's a lesson I've learned along the way. Never blame yourself for falling in love, and don't disregard warning signs. Most importantly, don't shoulder the blame for someone else's infidelity. If you know you've given your all, it reflects their character, not yours. Take this experience as a teaching moment and stay watchful, even when it pertains to your own family. You never truly know someone's intentions. As she lay on her simple inflatable mattress amidst fits of laughter, she confessed her modest desires to me. She didn't aspire to anything extravagant or complicated in life. Her dream was to become a kindergarten teacher, and when she saved enough money, she planned to further her education. It was she who unexpectedly brought up the topic of a date, and I could hardly believe the reality of the moment. Naturally, I accepted her invitation, but it was hard for me to fathom that my efforts had been noticed and appreciated. It might sound foolish, but in that moment, my one-year-old self was filled with skepticism. This experience prompted me to adopt a completely new persona, a kind of shield to protect myself from potential rejection or the disappointed looks that sometimes met me. I made a firm decision to stop fixating on John and the image he represented, choosing to liberate myself from their influence. I boldly decided to distance myself entirely. Obtaining a job was my initial step toward freedom, but it was meeting my new friend that truly illuminated my path and opened up a fresh perspective on life.